So you're given some kind of trig identity that looks like this. Blah. What the heck? What is this? And you're told, simplify this. And you're like, yeah, that's simplified. We're done. That's it. Okay. I'm going to help you figure out how to solve this problem. And this may not be the exact problem that you have, but I'd like to at least show you things that you can start seeing to help you solve these. One thing is sine squared plus cosine squared is equal to 1. That's a very helpful one to know because this is kind of the goal that you want to put problems into. Because once you do that, you can say it's equal to 1. The other thing is also if you have things like cosecant squared or secant squared or tangent or cotangent, you want to change those into things to say cosine or sine. Just in general, having cosine and sine is like the more simplified version. So if I were to put it in order, I would say cosecants, secants, cotangents are at the top of the least simplified. Then you have tangent. Tangent's actually not that bad. And then you have sine and cosine. So try and get down in this direction. Okay. All right. The first step that I would recommend is using the sine squared plus cosine squared is equal to 1 identity. And you might be wondering, like, what? How do I use that? All right. We're going to change this identity a little bit. I'm going to move the cosine squared over to here. And then I get sine squared is equal to 1 minus cosine squared. And hey, look, we have that. So I can change this for sine squared times cosecant squared. And then that's still going to be equal to 1. All right. Remember I also said that you want to change your cosecant squareds into something else. So find a list of identities, like a cheat sheet for that, and look up what cosecant is equal to. Well, cosecant is equal to 1 over sine. So if you have cosecant squared, that's 1 over sine squared. So let's change that. This is going to be 1 over sine squared times sine squared. And that is now equal to 1. Let's take that out. Right, because if you have sine squared over sine squared, they cancel out and become 1, right? All right, so that's the general idea for this one. I know that first one was kind of tough, but this is just practice. The more you see these, the better you'll get at identifying different things to plug or to like swap things out for. So let's try another one. Ooh, yeah. This is pretty. That's sarcasm, okay? I mean, actually, this could be pretty. It's just sometimes that they're a little bit like, oh, what do I do? All right, well, let's take a look at this problem. I'm thinking, okay. If you look at a list of trig equations or trig identities, we'll see that tangent is equal to sine over cosine. And then if we combine with this sine, we'll get sine squared over cosine. Okay. Let's see. Okay. We just have plus cosine, right? Equals secant. So I'm going to change secant into a nicer form. What is secant? Secant is equal to 1 over cosine. All right. Sometimes you don't want to change this, and it's actually better to keep it in this form, but I always like to change it to this, just so I can see, all right, if I'm going to be working with sines and cosines, what form do I want this to be in? Like, what form do I want all this stuff to end up in? That would make sense. Because, like, trying to see how secant is going to look like sines and cosines, it's not helpful. It's just not the same. But if I can see what it's going to look like in like 1 over cosine, that gives me a hint like, hey, this stuff has to become some way looking like 1 over cosine. All right, and I mentioned that because look, we have this one over cosine, but then we have just cosine. But remember, I was mentioning that there's the equation sine squared plus cosine squared is equal to 1. If I could get this guy over cosine, and then this becomes cosine squared, that would become equal to 1. So let's do that. Let's do sine squared over cosine plus cosine over cosine there, right? If I multiply it by cosine over cosine, it becomes this. Equals 1 over, all right, goodbye. 1 over cosine. So now if I combine this and I do sine squared plus cosine squared over cosine, I can say that's equal to this. Because the top becomes 1 over cosine equals 1 over cosine. All right. Let me know if this made sense. If you'd like to see other examples of this, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. All right. Have a good day.